We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program Washington Post national political reporter Dave Weigel. Did I get your title right?
Yeah, that sounds right. It's weird. Like, if you call me a staff writer, that's fine. If you call me a political reporter, that's fine. It's like the Pope has like 10 titles, so use one. You're good.
Pope is not one of your titles. Is that my understanding?
No, that's not me. That's the other guy.
All right. So, Dave, you are in Alabama at the moment. Is that correct?
I'm in a very rainy Mobile, Alabama. I was with Roy Moore and Steve Bannon last night, in close proximity to them, and I'm heading back north, really about probably 4 hours, depending, to cover the Doug Jones campaign. So I'm doing it all.
All right, well, so give us your general sense. I mean, I've seen polling that has come out that seems to be more or less all over the place. First, I guess, how would you characterize the polling that you're aware of, and then tell us what you get your sense from being on the ground there?
It's really good to be on the ground here, like more than usual, because this is a race that I have parachuted into since the summer. I came in kind of wistful for when I came in to talk to Doug Jones, and they said, "Hey, he's free in like 10 minutes. Just come over," which is not something he can do anymore, because no one gave him a shot. So people are fairly ashamed to admit they support Roy Moore unless they're in very rural areas where everyone supports Roy Moore. If you drive around, and lawn signs don't vote, but they're not useless. You drive around, I mean, you see places that everyone will tell me voted for Trump, and I'll check, and they voted for Trump, and you see Jones signs proudly in the front of people's yards. So it's one of these cases where everyone who wants to vote for Jones is like saying so, ringing alarm bells. They want the world to know. But there is a big vote out there for Roy Moore that would have been a much bigger vote for any other Republican. I mean, if I changed my name and presidency and I became a Republican candidate and I didn't sexually assault anyone years ago, I'd probably be leading by like 15, 20 points.
Right.
So it is, but you have found in the last couple of weeks something, and Bannon, he didn't make it explicit, like Dean Young, who's a Mobile-based defender, ally of Moore, he made it explicit. You basically have people who want this to be a replay of the Access Hollywood situation, where it breaks in the Washington Post a month before the election, and in the time between then and the election, people find a way to rationalize voting for the guy anyway.
I mean, that seems to be what happened in terms of Mitch McConnell. It seems what's happened with the RNC, right? Because McConnell has sort of backed off his threat that they would kick him out of the Senate if he got, or they wouldn't seat him. And the RNC is now kicked money back in after saying that they were pulling out.
Yeah, and people, again, it's fun being here because Alabamians are very polite, at least to a reporter from the Washington Post who didn't expect a lot of politeness. I mean, even last night at this Moore rally, these are the hardest hardcore Moore supporters, and they're happy to talk to me. They'll have like a joke about the Washington Post first, but they're very explicit. They had Moore done this stuff, they believe they wouldn't be voting for him. But you've seen in every poll, the horse race is one thing, but when you go down into the poll and Republicans are asked if they believe these allegations, they went from 25% believing them to closer to 0% believing them, and part of that is like polling math. There are people who are independents who usually vote Republican. This is a state where you're not registered Republican; you just go in for whatever primary you want. People who are independents, they voted for Romney. They're not calling themselves Republican voters right now because they're a little bit ashamed. I mean, you're seeing that in a lot of places. And so the other thing I'd add is Moore was on track to win before this happened, but Moore has also been an embarrassing figure for like a suburbanite, college-educated
right.
Alabama conservative for a very long time. And those people were on the other side, so they're looking for a reason to bail on him, and they've had it, and they just want this thing to be over.
Interesting. And so I mean, is your sense that Jones may be doing better than we get a notion of from polls, or not as well? I mean, it seems like there's those folks who are embarrassed to say that they're voting for Moore, but there's others who might not be identifying as Republicans, so you can't get a full notion of just how sort of sincere the support is.
Yeah, it's harder than usual to determine because Republicans are basically a black box when it comes to what they're doing to support the guy. If you go to Republican offices, you try to find a phone bank. They existed before the scandal broke. It's hard to, they're not really opening it up now. Moore's campaign is very tiny. They have only a handful of full-time staffers. They have national. I mean, a lot of people you see on CNN defending him are not even in Alabama. They're just like conservatives who have known the guy and are calling in to help him out. It's very Trump-like, and I think despite the Virginia election, which kind of shook off a lot of trauma people had about, or liberals had about, man, maybe we're always going to lose elections. Maybe there's a secret vote that comes out and smashes at the last minute. That calmed a couple of nerves, but not a lot of them, because Moore has proven to have this base that will turn out in any election. The question is whether the RNC is going to help turn people out, and whether the Alabama GOP is actually going to turn these people out. And as we're talking, I don't think the Al Franken thing was actually affecting votes down here. There's this theory, I think Matt Iglesias from Vox and other people said, that there might be voters who are making excuses for Moore because of Franken. I do think for a day that's going to make some of those suburbanites say, man, all right, do I really want to be less ethical than Chuck Schumer? But not many. I mean, you just have a state where most voters want to vote Republican. It reminds me, frankly, I live in D.C. I moved there after Marion Barry, but a lot of it reminds me of the Marion Barry situation, where no matter what he was accused of, people did not want to replace him with a white Republican, and people here don't want to replace don't even want for a couple of years a pro-choice Democrat.
Would there? I mean, you've been in states where elections are 5 days away many times, I imagine. Are there mechanisms that you would see on the ground that you do or do not see now that would indicate that the Republicans are planning a big get out the vote effort, or no?
Well, not really, but this is the thing that always goes back to the Trump campaign, because if you were a savvy reporter, and I try to be, and you went to some of these states before a primary with Trump, you'd struggle to find organized Trump support. What's the thing Bill Mitchell said? His ground game is in our hearts. Everyone laughed at that, but that was kind of true. But here are the differences. Let's not trap ourselves in the phantom zone of 2016 forever, if we can. The difference here is Moore is a known quantity in Alabama. Before this, his last election, he was on the ballot with Mitt Romney. He only won by 4 points. Mitt Romney won by a lot more than that. So there are lots of voters who are used to not voting for this guy. The other thing is Doug Jones is not Hillary Clinton. He is pro-choice. And the one mistake people agree he's made, Democrats I'm talking about, and people don't like to hear this, but they'll agree he goofed. He was on Meet the Press. He got another question about abortion, and he didn't answer it very artfully. He said, he didn't want to see any restrictions on abortion. So Republicans have used that to say he's too left wing for the state, but they haven't had the money to say it on the air. And also, he's not Hillary Clinton, not just because there's not 30 years of people learning to hate the guy. I mean, last night I'm at this Moore rally, and I had to pull myself away from a voter I was talking to who had a bunch of transgender Hillary jokes, so I didn't realize we're still in fashion. Not just that, but I don't have any inside sources saying otherwise. I don't think the FBI is going to release a letter today saying they've opened a probe into his email. Right? There's just there's not a black swan event that seems. Geez, if you can have an unlikely black swan event, if I'm not ruining the metaphor enough,
right?
Just there are weaknesses he doesn't have that Hillary did,
and not to mention he's not a woman, which is also, I think, like just sort of a deficit that, it seems to me that Moore is activating, right, a certain mentality that. I think, a certain mentality, particularly in respect to women. You have people justifying, like, well, this is the way we do it down here. Old enough to set the table, old enough to eat, or whatever it is. This attitude is, I think, activates also the sort of the flip side of that coin, which is, or maybe it's not a flip side, but the misogyny towards the other candidate, which obviously. It's not going to be Doug Jones's problem. So what is Doug Jones now? What is he doing the next 5 days? How much? Let me ask you this: how much of an apparatus is there around Doug Jones? How much of an effort is there to not make it appear like it is being sent from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer?
So the Alabama Democratic Party is like one of these houses in a really dilapidated part of town where you can get it for like $10,000, but you need to put $100,000 of work into it. They were really wiped out completely under Obama, and for reasons that probably take too long to get into on a show like this. Like what happened all across the South, most of the white Democrats lost their races or got gerrymandered out. And black Democrats who have not won statewide ever, they kind of control the party apparatus. So Jones did exactly what you're supposed to do to win. He has helped the Black Democratic Conference in the state. He's given the money to get out the vote in the black belt, which is kind of Montgomery and a straight line towards Mississippi. He's done that. But he's otherwise had to kind of build a campaign from nothing, and he's had outside support, but it's not quite. I saw a lot for Ralph Northam in Virginia, and that's a state that has a good Democratic Party. It's not as much as that. It is. You see signs everywhere. It is not the same thing where you're constantly seeing digital ads and you see people going to phone banks, and yeah, you'll stop by a phone bank and people are there, but it is not the. It's not the cause, like the cause of the year, the way that Virginia race was, or even John Ossoff's race was. But like it's visible, and there's a lot of it. And when he shows up to places, he gets a crowd. He gave a speech yesterday to kind of reset the race, and with a more kind of negative tone about Moore. He had 100 people show up on short notice, and Moore had, with like a week's notice and guest stars, about 300 people in a really Republican part of the state. So like that's the thing about this. It is not hitting people as this world struggle for supremacy in the Senate. And I think because that's hurting each candidate in different ways. I think it's probably more helpful to Jones that he wouldn't be like the vote who flips the Senate completely.
Right.
And it hurts more a little bit because they end up making this kind of Calvin Ball argument that if Jones wins, that's one less vote for Supreme Court justices who you agree with, and that would be bad because then maybe Roe versus Wade wouldn't be overturned. And like it's something I've seen work in other races when Obama was president or when Nancy Pelosi was speaker. And here it's like a push. It's not selling quite as well.
I mean, it's equivalent on some level to vote for Donald Trump because you'll get Neil Gorsuch. I mean, maybe not but you'll get that Supreme Court seat. There is no similar sort of, I guess, urgent appeal. And I mean, that's interesting. Yeah. Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos